What's up, everybody? We're back here again for episode 41 of the Pitside podcast. I'm here, as always, with my buddy Roger Craig. I think this is going to be an extra special episode this week. We're very fortunate to have Brody Sim's father, Ed, here with us this week, so we're going to talk to him for a little bit, both about what's been going on in their life and some of the challenges they're dealing with, as well as our upcoming charity event, which is here in just a few weeks. So if you stay tuned, we'll get started in just a minute.
To the Pitside podcast, where we discuss the latest news and developments in the Coast to Coast Racing League, as well as other racing news inside and out of iRacing. Here's your host, the A-Let Outlaw, Preston Cranmer, and Roger, the Bassman, Craig.
So we're back, like I said, episode 41, and I'm telling you, this one might go down in the history books as our best episode. We did record this one out of order again, so we've already had the privilege of getting to talk to Ed. You guys will get to see that in a few minutes, but it was an amazing conversation. You're not going to want to miss it. He's very, very open about what they've been through, not just in their most recent, challenge with Brody being in a sprint car accident, but just generally, Brody's lived a tough life, and if you've ever heard him speak, you'd never know it. He's a positive, upbeat guy, and things are still it's a tough spot, but it's looking encouraging. So we'll get to talk to Ed about that here in a few minutes. But we've had a great week in the league. The racing is getting better. I can speak personally. My IL is still not great, but it's getting better. So it's things are looking up there.
So, buddy, I am one. I still got to finish top 10 to transfer, but I am eligible to transfer to Renegades. I'm only like one of two guys. Me and Bob the Good. We could. It was. I was shocked. I think I'm at 197 or something. But it's really interesting to see that the racing is really cleaned up. We had some flag to flag winners. John Short won the draw for the Renegades. Aiden Young won one for the Hometown Heroes 305s. And we'll have a draw. Actually, following this podcast, the Raiders had one caution, so there'll be a $5 iRacing credit there.
Yeah,
so,
and Rebels were actually really close too. We had one caution early on, had a real long run. I think we got to right at halfway, had another caution, and then went the rest of the way.
Yeah. So the racing's and the Renegades racing is always great. So it's good, and I think from comments I've heard, I think some of the people who are struggling with their IL are getting the message and figuring it out, and it's been great. So that's been a real positive thing happening. And then I'm not sure how it's turned out, but we're recording this on Tuesday. Wednesday we have our the NASCAR Super Speedway Series that I'm kind of excited about because I can stay competitive in that. And then we'll have the 358s coming back on Thursday matinees. So that's going to be interesting as well. So we'll be interested to see how those turn out. We'll know by this podcast time when it's published. So it's been good.
Yeah, and we've got some. We usually do it, and I read out the new members. I'm going to put Roger on the spot and talk here for a minute so he can get the list up. But
I've got it.
Roger was more prepared for this week than I was. So, Roger, who do we have that's joined the league in the past 7 days?
So we have three new guys. So we've got Aaron C. Gerwitz, Harvey Shanks, and Brett Carlton. Welcome, guys, and if you're out there and you see these guys on the track or they need any help, just step up and welcome them and help them with anything they might need. So that's So it's we continue to grow, and not as much as some other weeks, but we're always getting like 3, 5, 7, 10 new members. So.
Yeah, well, and we did have really less days for new members this past week with the big money race. We didn't even mention that. So we had the big money race this past week, and so we had a period where we didn't accept new members because we wanted to make sure it was guys that had been in the league. We didn't want the hot shoes showing up just to steal our money away, which I didn't win anyway. But anyway, that actually went really well too. I was very pleased. Everybody kept their heads and raced clean for the most part, or as about as we've seen this season. It's probably fair. So that went really well. And then we've got, obviously, we're getting ready to talk to Ed here in a few minutes, but I guess I can't do the math in my head, but about a month, maybe 3 weeks here, we've got our fundraising, our charity event for this season, which is in honor of Brody Sim. We're going to try to give him some assistance. It's the Never Give Up 22. Each feature will be 22 laps in honor of the number that he ran, and that will be August 17th through the 23rd. So it'll be our regular race nights, so close to that. And if you guys don't realize it, Roger, we do the green screen in post, so he just has a green shower curtain behind him and has no idea where he's pointing.
I think it's somewhere up here.
I don't know. Yeah, it's right there. If just turn and look over your right shoulder, you'll see it for sure. But no, so that's going to be, we're running 2 divisions. We're running Pro Late models, correct, and then 305 sprints, which is what Brody was running at the time too. So all fixed. It's going to be that, if I'm not mistaken, the entry fees are $10 for one division, $15 for 2, just like we've done in the past. You guys really stepped up for our last charity event for the vets, and for Grady, the event prior to that. So we're hoping to replicate a similar production on our end, and we're going to make it a big deal and give Brody some help.
So there'll be 4 races for each class. They should all be broadcast, and everybody's guaranteed 3 races. So there'll be there's 2 qualifiers and then their last chance, and then of course the championship night. So looking forward to it. Just check out this video that's following and give it your support. I guess the one last thing I wanted to mention too was this coming Wednesday, Hometown Heroes will be Veterans Night. So it's PTSD awareness, and the Veterans League will be running. So we'll be running the 305s. I can't remember. I think it might be the midgets, but the 360 fixed Veterans League. So if you're a veteran out there and you haven't joined that league, if you raced last season, don't worry, you're in. But if you didn't race last season in that race, contact us and we'll make sure you're eligible to run that, because it's a great bunch of guys. It's some of the cleanest racing we saw. Navy wasn't going after Air Force wasn't going after Army. I mean, they were all out there just racing super clean and respectful. So it's a great event. And then the following week we got the father-son, and I haven't talked too much about that, but what we're doing is the sons will be driving Legends cars, and the dads will be driving street stocks. So and we encourage you guys to match the colors of those 2 cars, so we can kind of see who's who. So hopefully everybody doesn't come out with a blue car or a black car,
or an iRacing paint scheme.
Or an iRace, yeah. So anyways, that's coming up. So stay tuned for that. But the Brody Sim charity event, that fundraiser, make sure you get involved in that. And after you've watched this interview, and like Preston said, it's 10 for one, 15 for the other. But hey, you can donate whatever you want. And the guys really dug deep in their pockets last time, and let's do it again. This family's, they're going through some tough, mental times, and of course the whole financial thing. And Ed gets into that a bit. The whole technical side of, what do you call the injury, and then the insurance, dealing with the insurance companies and all that sort of stuff. So,
it's a shame. I mean, it's a shame that they're having to deal with that. So yeah, and that's what I wanted to add is I am completely inspired, not just by, before this happened, Brody was extremely inspirational, but I didn't know his family, and having talked to Ed, it seems like the whole family is just, they're fighters. They're just absolutely fighters. If you haven't watched any of our interviews on the podcast before, you just stick around for the fun of Roger and I. Obviously, that's why most everybody's here, right? This is the one you don't want to miss. If you never watched one before and you never watch one again, this is the one. You're not going to want to miss it. And then I fully expect. We probably should have had the donation link up and ready to go already, because I think after hearing Ed talk, people are going to want to start figuring out how to give. And so we'll make sure we facilitate that. 100% of our proceeds go directly to Brody's family through the Steve King Foundation, when we mentioned that again in the interview. But there's no, our only motivation here is to get those guys some help. So let's jump over and talk to Ed. We're going to close the show with this. So as always, thanks for watching again, episode 41. And we'll see you back here again for episode 42. Did I miss something, Roger? Did you want to?
The only thing I was going to say is I think at tag the end of this, we'll have the GoFundMe site, the link to it, and so if people want to donate, you don't have to race to donate. If you and I ask everybody in the league, if you just do one favor for me, is watch this next interview and see if you're not touched by it, and and then we'll have the GoFundMe site up before this is produced on Sunday. So you should see it at the end of this show, and just whatever anybody can do to help out.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.
And we are very honored today to have Brody Sim's dad, Ed, along with us. And Ed and I had a brief conversation this afternoon, and very enlightening. And first of all, how are you doing tonight, Ed?
Pretty good. Going pretty good.
And the more important question, how's Brody doing?
He's getting there. Sometimes it's day by day. Sometimes it's hour by hour. Some days are good. Some hours are good. A lot of it now is he's still got, he's in a wheelchair, so that's a little hard for him because he's usually pretty active with going to school, then going to work, then working. Working in the shop and then going racing on weekends. And so he's a little bit struggling with being in the wheelchair. And then his mind isn't quite working right yet. Sometimes he remembers things, sometimes he doesn't. His emotions, sometimes he's, laughing, sometimes he's crying, sometimes he's upset. So his emotions aren't quite, where they should be. And we have some appointments this week. We have an appointment tomorrow up in Portland area, which is about 60 miles south of us. And then we got actually 6 miles north of us, I'm sorry. And then we have another appointment here in town on Thursday. So we're a little bit busy this week.
So I guess the one thing that makes it special with us and Brody is that he actually joined our league like 3 days before the accident. So he's never had a chance to race with us. So there's certainly a special connection that we have now with Brody. And can you take us back to there's an interview he did like I think an hour before the accident, and I was just super impressed with Brody and the way he handled himself, and what he's been through. And then after talking to you earlier today, I only knew a fraction of what he's dealt with in his life, and just an amazing young man. So but could you just take us back to maybe that night, and then we'll talk about the rest after that?
Sure. So we had kind of at the beginning of the season, Brody had raced the sprint car 2 years ago, and then he had some issues with his leg, and then he had 2 surgeries over the winter, and then we had a sponsor who's Brody's been racing for, Chris Rolfe, who purchased a new car for Brody. And so we had been like 4 races into the season, and Brody was currently leading the points at Cottage Grove Speedway. He was doing really well. We were trying to raced a little bit with the Interstate Sprint Car Series, which is a series that goes around the Northwest. We race at so we start Cottage Grove Speedway, Coos Bay Speedway, Grays Harbor, several other tracks in the Northwest. And we just started that series, and he was leading in points and doing really well. He hadn't won a race, but he was consistently finishing in the top 5. But he was excited because he's 16, and so he's probably the youngest driver in that series, and one of the youngest that races in the sprint car at Cottage Grove. And Dirt Oval TV broadcast all the races on their channel, and so they came out and did an interview with Brody. And as you can see by the interview, when people watch the interview, Brody's very well spoken. He's very polite. He's very outgoing. When I talked to you earlier, he transferred schools, so he'd go to a school where they have a welding and a fabrication, and so he goes to school in the morning. Was going to school in the morning. He'd get out at 2:00, drive to another town, go to work until 6, and then go work on the race car. And one of the things that's good about Brody is, one of the things I've always told him is, if he's going to race it, he's going to work on it. And so he did all his own setup. He does all his own stuff. He learned, the engine builder sat down with him and showed him, actually videotaped on how to set his valves, how to clean the injectors, how to set up the car. And so he He's learned to do all this himself. And so then they did we went to the races that night. He was excited about the night to start. It was actually the first night of a 2-night series. We were supposed to race Cottage Grove one night, and I think we're going to Coos Bay the next night. And they came over to interview him about an hour before his accident. He went out and he qualified second or third out of the 18 sprint cars that were there that night. He sat on the pole of the heat race, and he took off, and he was leading. He was the second place guy got underneath him a couple times going around the corner, but Brody just stayed on the gas, and he was kind of coming around the corner. I've watched the video a couple times. At first, when I saw the accident in person, it looked like his right rear tire got over the berm, and it just sent the car off into the concrete wall. But what had actually happened, he was coming around, he's kind of high on the track, and there's a little bump in the track, and that's what actually set the car off. And so it set the car off, and he just spun him backwards, and he basically hit his left rear, kind of hit the concrete wall, and then sent the left side of the car right into the concrete wall at full speed. And he was knocked out. He was unconscious immediately. And then paramedics got to him right away. The Cottage Grove Speedway did a great job getting to him. They had to carefully get him out of the car because he was kind of trapped in the car a little bit. And so they weren't sure about his back and his stuff because he was unconscious. He wasn't responding at all to us or wouldn't respond at all. And so they got him out of the car. The crew that was there actually called a rescue crew from the local, fire department. They came out, helped us get him out of the car. They actually got him out of the car. And then they transported him to a local hospital in Eugene, which is about 40 miles away from the track. And then at the track, at Eugene Hospital, they did a CAT scan, and they found in the CAT scan that his brain was bleeding and swelling. And so they did an emergency transfer to a trauma hospital up in Portland, which is about 100 miles away from Eugene. So they transported him up to Portland to what's called Emmanuel Hospital, and they had a trauma team all waiting for him. He was still unconscious when he got there. And at first they wouldn't let us in the room with him because of a couple reasons, COVID, and then one of the reasons why he wasn't stabilized yet because he had stopped breathing. And so they got him stabilized, and they finally let us in the room with him after they got him stabilized. And then they sent him over to what's called Randall Children's Hospital, which is kind of in the same complex. So they sent us over there in ICU, and they had a trauma team waiting for him. And again, they didn't want to do an MRI on him because he was unconscious and his body was like twitching a little bit. And when you're in the MRI, you have to remain completely still. And so, but they didn't want to sedate him because they were worried if they sedated him and he stopped breathing again, they wouldn't be able to bring him back. So they just went off what was going on in the CAT scan, and then they put him on some, they had oxygen. He was on oxygen and IV and a bunch of medications, and the medication finally, stopped the swelling, it stopped the bleeding, and he was unconscious for about 28 hours. And then he slowly started coming around and waking up, and he'd wake up for like 10 minutes and then go back out, and he'd be out for another couple hours, and then he'd wake up for a little bit longer, and then he'd go back out, and then it was probably about 3 days later where he could finally stay up a little bit without having to go back out. So
yeah. And also he broke his pelvis, correct?
Correct. So they found, because when he did finally come awake, every time they would go to move him or he'd move a little bit, he would grab his right hip. And so they went back through the CAT scan because they did a full body CAT scan on him. And when they went through that, they found he broke his pelvic bone, and actually a vertebrae in his upper back was broken too. But the main part is the hip is the pelvic bone is kind of broken from the inside down to where like the socket is.
So he's in a wheelchair right now, correct?
He's in a wheelchair right now, and the brake was nice. What they're saying is a nice and clean brake. And so they had him in a wheelchair for 4 weeks and said he had to be really careful because if the brake was to separate at all, then they were going to have to do surgery. So then we went in about a week and a half ago, we went in, they did another x-ray, and it shows the brake is healing a little bit, but it's still not healing as fast as what they want it to. And so he's in a wheelchair again till August 4th. And August 4th, they'll go in and do another x-ray and see. And you still got to be careful because they want to make sure that brake doesn't shift or doesn't separate, because if it shifts or separates, then they'll have to go in and do put pins in.
Yeah. So, harrowing experience for him, but I can't imagine what you and your wife have gone through this whole time too. I can't imagine it.
It was tough. It was, I would think I was the Cottage Grove Speedway staff and crew there. They did a great job of getting to him, and then I was like the third or fourth person to get to him. So it was tough seeing him unconscious because I was trying to, I was like, Brody, talk to me. He wouldn't talk to me, and of course, because he was unconscious. And then it was even, tough on the Cottage Grove crew guys that were there helping, because Brody's been started racing. So most people who've been to Cottage Grove Speedway, they have the big track on the outside, which is where the sprint cars and the full-size cars race. But on the middle of Cottage Grove Speedway is a cage kart track, a go-kart track. So Brody's been racing there since he was 5 years old. And so all the crew has basically been the same since he was 5 years old. And a lot of them, helped out with his racing or sponsored part of his racing when he was racing cage karts. So they were the ones that were having to take care of him, pull him out of the car. So it was devastating to them because it was like he was one of their family members and they're having to take him out of the car. So it was really hard on everybody that was there. It was hard on everybody.
Yeah. So the good news is that he's improving and getting better, and I think sort of jump into it that you feel that in a year's time that he has a capability of getting back to normal.
Yes. So they did finally do an MRI, which was about 3 weeks ago. I think they did an MRI, and they found a dark spot on the frontal lobe of his brain, and that dark spot's deep into the brain, and they say that will never go away. And then on the left side of his brain, they found 10 dark spots and a contusion. The dark spots won't go away, but the contusion will go away. So like right now, he's getting better, but like right now, his right side, I guess we found out, we didn't realize this, but the left side of your brain controls your right side. Mm-hmm. And so he is having problems like gripping things. He's having problems with his right, side a little bit because, of the damage that was done to his brain. But they have him going to a bunch of treatment. Like tomorrow we have, I think it's a speech therapy and some occupational therapy. And then Wednesday we go to another therapy. He hasn't started physical therapy yet, but just some stuff to retrain his brain. They said his right side of his brain is better than normal, and it's compensating for the issues on the left side. So they think within a year and a half that he should be back to normal, except for, again, those dark spots, which they say will probably, never go away.
Yeah, but the brain is an amazing
yes.
organ that can work things around. So
yes.
When we were talking today earlier, and I think this is the important part, is Brody is an amazing kid.
Yes.
What he has gone through. Now, I knew about the cancer and I think he had it when he was 8, and
yes.
Then came back when he was 12, and then something like that. Was that
came back just last April, so he was 15. Yes. Okay.
And then he had the metal plates put in.
Yes.
He had to have them removed because of the cold was bothering him.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So I've been blown away by what he's been through, and your whole family's been through up to now. But then you shed some light today, and stuff that you were comfortable talking about, just what he has been through in his life. So
yes.
You want to talk a little bit about this, because this kid is just amazing.
Sure. So Brody is considered through the state of Oregon as a special needs adopted child. So he was born with meth and cocaine in his system, and he was kind of through the foster system until he was like 8 months old, and then we got custody of him when he was 8 months old. And when he was 8 months old, he wasn't like a normal 8-month-old. You know, he actually didn't start to talk until he was almost 2. He didn't walk until after he was 2. And when he was younger, we give him a bad time sometimes, because when he was younger, his only way of communicating, like we'd have him in his crib, and sometimes the only way of his communicating was you'd hit his head on the wall. That's how we would know he was awake. And so he went through that, and then also, so because of the meth and cocaine, his lungs weren't fully developed, so he had asthma really bad. And so his neck muscles weren't very, very well, so it was hard for him to keep his head up. And so one of the things that he started doing was, like, when he was 3 years old, I took him out, and Brody's also the type of kid, when he focuses on something, he focuses on that. And so, like, when he was about 3.5 years old, he wanted a bike. And so I took him out, we got him a bike, I took him out, and it was like within a week, he was riding without training wheels. And he was out every single day just riding his bike. And one day they had like a bike day at school, and so he took his bike and he was ripping around, and everybody's like, what? You know, and one of the parents or teachers that were there said, hey, have you ever thought about getting Brody into BMX racing? And I'm like, what's BMX racing? And they said, well, it's considered bicycle motocross. And I said, no, never heard of it before. And they said, well, Brody would probably be really good at it. And so there's a local track up in Salem, and I took him up there, and he took right to it, and he just focused on it, and he ended up being, like, at 5 years old, he was a BMX state champion, and we went to a bunch of regional races. And then he had to be really careful because his lungs weren't fully developed, and so he would get tired really easy, but he always worked his way through it. And then that was one of the other issues we were having when he was BMX racing. He didn't have very good neck muscles, and so when he'd wear a helmet and when he'd go to fall, the first thing that would hit on the ground was his head, because he couldn't keep his head up. So BMX racing, he had 2 minor concussions, and then he had 1 major concussion where he was actually knocked out. And so they told us, hey, maybe you should consider getting Brody into something else, because these crashes on his bike with 3 concussions, and he's only 5 years old, maybe you should consider getting him into something else. And so I took him to a cage kart race. My nephew was racing cage karts, so I took him to a cage kart race, and he just fell in love with it. So then he started focusing on cage kart racing, and so he started doing that, and he started doing really well at cage kart racing, and we started traveling all up and down the West Coast. We would race in Arizona, to California, to Washington, Oregon. We were racing all up and down the West Coast. And then probably when Brody was about 8 years old, he was 8 years old. He came to me and he was saying, hey, Dad, my knee hurts. And I was like, it's just growing pains, buddy. And so then a couple times a week, he'd come to me and say, Dad, my knee hurts. And I'm like, you're just growing pains. But I never looked at it. Because I just assumed he was having growing pains. And so then he woke me up one night, he was crying and said, Dad, my knee really, really hurts. Well, then I decided, I guess I should look at it. And so I looked at the inside. It's kind of on his left leg. It was kind of on the inside. I think it's his left leg. Anyway, and to me, again, it looked like he had water on the knee. And there was a bump there, and it looked like water on the knee. So I told my wife, I said, hey, why don't you make an appointment for later in the week? Looks like he's got water on the knee. We'll go, have it drained out. So she makes an appointment, take him to the doctor a couple days later, and the doctor looks at it and says, no, something's wrong here. This is a water on the knee. So they took him to the local hospital here, and they did some x-rays, and I knew something was wrong because doctors kept coming in and out and looking at the x-ray and then feeling his leg and then looking at the x-ray, feeling his leg. And then they finally said, hey, we're going to send you up to what's called Dornbecker's Children's Hospital, which again is in Portland, which is about 60 miles north of here. I'm like, why is that? And they said, well, he's got a tumor in his tibia bone. I'm like, really? Yeah. So we Went right up to Dornbecker's Children's Hospital. They did a bunch of MRIs, did a bunch of checks on him, and they said, yeah, he's got a tumor in his tibia bone, and they're gonna have to cut out like upper portion of his tibia bone. So they like sent out a nationwide search for a donor bone, which only took a couple days. And they went in there and they cut off like the top of his tibia bone, and then they grafted in a whole new tibia bone, a donor bone. And at the time, they told us there was probably like a 25% chance that it may come back, because it was the upper portion that they had to take out. It was like the tumor was right against the growth plate. So normally, kind of in regular terms, is they normally would go in there when they tumor and they take it out, they like pressure wash it out really well. Well, they couldn't do that because they were afraid they were going to damage the growth plate. So they said, so there's going to be a 25% chance of it coming back. So over the years, he had some problems and he had some issues with it, but nothing real, issues. And then he started having some breathing issues. And so he was getting his really bad migraines, and he was having breathing issues. And then he was having issues with his heart. So I took him to, he has a team of specialists up at what's called Dornbecker's Children's Hospital. He has an orthopedic doctor, a neurologist, and a cardiologist all up there. And they discovered, because his lungs aren't fully developed, he also has what's called left ventricle hypertrophy, which means if he does too much, his heart doesn't get enough oxygen, which causes the muscle on the left side of his heart to swell. So we have to be careful with that. And so we took a little bit of time off from racing, and we met a really nice, super nice guy and his wife. So one day they called me. His name is Chris Rolfe. He called me and said, hey, what's going on with Brody? How come he isn't racing? And I just basically told him he's got some medical issues. I don't have time to take care of the cart and take care of him and go racing and take care of Brody. And he says, okay, well, I'll call you back in a couple days. So he called him back in a couple days, and he says, why don't you meet with me this weekend? You and Brody meet with me. And so we went out, we met with him, or went down and met with him. And he says, hey, I know Brody's got a lot going on right now. He goes, I want to start taking care of some stuff. I want to start helping out. He goes, I want to put Brody in one of my go-karts, one of my cage carts. And I'm like, really? And we're like, yeah. He goes, Ed, you focus on taking care of Brody. I will take care of the carts. He goes, you bring Brody to the track. There'll be a cart waiting there for him, and everything will be taken care of. And so I think Brody was probably 11 or 12 then. And so I started taking Brody to the track. I would focus on Brody, and Chris would take care of everything. He'd get a brand new, top of the line QRC, always brand new stuff. And him and Brody clicked, and he started taking care of Brody with the racing stuff. And he was a great, person for Brody to be around. He kind of became a mentor to Brody, and he took care of all our racing stuff for us. We'd race Red Bluff, California. We'd race Cottage Grove. Brody got invited back to what's called a Keith Koontz Give Back race in North Carolina. And we went back to North Carolina and racing. He took care of all that for us. And it was just amazing. And so when Brody turned 12 years old, we started racing locally here in the street stock, and Chris helped us out some there. And then when Brody Brody turned about 15. Well, last April, Brody came to me and said, Dad, my leg's hurting. And I said, okay, are you sure it isn't one of those, where it's just sore? And he says, no, something's really wrong this time. And I said, okay. So took him back to the doctor, and they told us, man, unfortunately the tumor's back, and it's actually bigger than what it was before. So this time they ordered, COVID was all going on and everything at this time. And so they ordered an emergency surgery to him. And this time they went in and they had to grind out the tumor out of his tibia bone. And the tumor this time was in what was left of his original tibia bone, not where the donor bone was. So they had to go in there, grind it all out. And this time they put in donor bone chips, and they filled it in, and then they kind of sealed it off. And then they put in 2 plates and 6 screws. And they told him these plates and screws may be in there forever. And they told him he probably wouldn't walk the rest of the summer, and he'd probably be in, again, a wheelchair for the rest of the summer. And that was last April. And so about June, he started kind of feeling better, and he started getting up and walking around a little bit, and he started doing things. And I take him to the doctor, and the doctor says, as long as he's not in pain, let him do what he wants to do. And so I have personally been kind of always second guess about sprint car racing, because I love sprint car racing, but I've never really liked Brody racing a sprint car because they just make me nervous. But he loves them. It's his heart. It's what's in his heart. It's what he loves to do. So I got him, the doctor cleared him to go back racing towards the end of last summer, but not in a sprint car. So we had got some help, and we got him modified, and we raced 2 races here in Oregon in the modified, and then we got some more help, and we actually went to the Midwest and raced. So he raced in Kansas, where we practiced on a Thursday, and then we raced on Friday and Saturday. And then the next week we stayed back there, and the next week we traveled on to Missouri, and he raced Thursday, practiced on Thursday, raced again Friday and Saturday, and again did really well back there in the Midwest, racing an IMCA modified. And then we kind of made a vacation out of it. We were gone for like 3 weeks. We went up and visited some family in Minnesota, and then we came back through South Dakota and went, made a big vacation out of it. So then about that time, so we do winter kart racing here in Oregon too. It's indoor. So Chris again, said, hey, I got the kart ready. Is Brody ready to go racing? And we said, yes, let's go. And so we did a couple races down at Red Bluff, California. We did some races here, and Brody started having problems with his leg again. And so took him back up because his leg kept swelling and it kept hurting. And so we took him back up to Dornbecker's, and Dornbecker said, there's an issue with the plates and the screws that are in there. One of the screws that looked like caused an infection on his bone. And they said, we're going to need to go in and take out those plates and screws. So he had to have another surgery where they went in, they took out the plates and screws and kind of cleaned up the bone a little bit. And what was a little bit different about this surgery is instead of stitching him up, they did stitches on the inside, but then they glued the outside of his leg. And so probably 4 or 5 days after his surgery, he was noticing something was going on with his leg, and we're like, okay, we started looking at it, and well, it turned out to be he had got a really bad skin infection from the glue. So that set him back a few weeks because of that skin infection. It turned out we got lucky that it didn't get into his bloodstream, because if it would have got into his bloodstream, who knows, where we would have from there. So then about that time, again, during the winter, Chris Rolfe, who had been helping Brody out or been supplying Brody the cart, he come back up and said, hey, what are your plans for this summer? And I said, I really don't know yet. And he's talked to Brody, and Brody was like, I really want to go back sprint car racing. He goes, that's where my love is. That's where my heart is. That's what I want to do. Well, then Chris, said, hey, I want to step up and not only help out with karts, but I want to step up and help out Brody get it in a sprint car. So Chris went out and basically purchased a new J&J sprint car for Brody. And so Chris built the whole thing, put it together for him, and then we got Brody fitted for it. And then, like I said, we started the season out really well. And then again, the accident happened. So that's kind of his story and what he's been through the last, since he was younger.
Yeah, that's
it really sticks out to me because you mentioned it at the beginning. Everything he's been after between his medical issues and racing has all been driven by his own determination,
Yes.
And
yeah.
that is something you can probably fall back with a little bit of comfort, at this moment, because he clearly is a very determined young man. I found it. It's not amusing at the time, right? But you were mentioning that he didn't start talking until a little bit later when he was 2, and that's a little amusing to me because my first experience with him was watching this interview, and he was so well spoken, and it's just kind of funny to hear you say that he didn't start talking on time or whatever that would be considered, because he sounded like a grown man out there that it's just really funny.
And he loves racing. He is so focused on racing. He, like I was saying, he sets up his own cars. He even sets the valves on them. He cleans out the injectors. And he's told us, over the years, and one of the reasons why we were determined on keeping him racing, and Chris was determined on keeping him racing, is through all these medical problems, he'd always say, the only time I feel like a normal kid is when I'm sitting in my race car on the track, because that's the only time I feel normal. And so we always, we always helped, because like me and my wife, we don't make that much money. I mean, we do okay, but it's just a help from other people. All the people who've stepped up and, helped Brody and done things for Brody, because they see how determined he is. They see what he's been through. And like I said, if you talk to him, he'll tell you the only time I feel like a normal kid is when I'm in my car racing. And he goes, all my worries, everything goes away. The pain in my leg goes away. The things that's going on in my head goes away. Everything goes away when I'm on the track or even at the track, And so he's very determined to get to the track and get up to the shop, make sure his car's all ready and everything to go.
One of the interesting things I found in the interview was he was talking about when he drove the modifieds. He said, tip of the hat to those guys. Those things are really hard to drive. And he'd rather be in the sprint car. And I'm thinking most guys in modifieds, move their way up to a sprint car or whatever. And he was the other way. He'd rather be in a sprint car than he found the modifieds more challenging. So that was kind of interesting in that interview. And Preston, we need to either tag that interview to the end of this podcast or at least post it on our Facebook, because it's an amazing interview that he conducted there just before he got injured.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure people have access to that.
Yeah. So another tip of the hat to you, Ed, because talking today, you've adopted two kids. You adopted his sister, well, not his physical sister, but his sister.
Yes.
She was you got her a year earlier than Brody?
Yes. So a little over a year. So we adopted our sister. Her name is Angel, and we adopted her we got her when she was 5 months old. Same issues as Brody, and then we so we had experience. My wife and I had experience with children with born addicted to drugs and alcohol or alcohol system. So we had her about a year, and then the state of Oregon called and said, "Hey, we have this little boy who has similar issues. We know you have experience with a child," and so they said he has a rough time. We're not even sure if he's going to make it or not. But would you guys be interested in taking this little boy? And of course, my wife, I have to give a lot of credit to my wife, because I was kind of, man, that's going to be tough. And she didn't even hesitate. She says, yes, absolutely. We're going to take this boy. We're going to, raise him as our own. And like people say to us, man, that's great that you guys did that. And to us, it's kind of the opposite with us. We feel like we are the privileged ones because both of them are amazing kids. We feel like we are the ones that are lucky. We're the lucky ones to have them in our lives. So
well, I know, like I told you earlier, I know there's a couple up here that we're friends with, and they've adopted two children who have gone through similar backgrounds, and I know what they go through, in bringing these kids up and the challenges. I got total respect for you and your wife, and God bless you, man. Or like you say, they weren't even sure about Brody, when he was young, and now he's a thriving individual with challenges, but and obviously with the fortitude and the strength to face up to those. So this kid's got more courage than I think I would ever have, and I can't say enough about him.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I did notice is it looks like you're sitting in the sim rig. Are you sitting in the sim rig?
I'm actually sitting in Brody's room, because like I said, I'm not very computer savvy. I don't know. My wife is very good at computer stuff. Brody's good at computer stuff, so I'm actually sitting in Brody's room.
Yeah. And is that his racing seat that you're sitting in?
His iRacing seat.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is where he sits and does his iRacing.
So like I said earlier, it was Brody had joined our league, 3 days before the accident. Never got a chance to run with us, so there's definitely a special connection. But have you done any iRacing?
I have not. I have. Well, Brody gets me on here. Used to get me on here every once in a while, and I could never even keep a car on the track.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So I'm not very good at yes.
Well, you know what, the account's sitting there, and you're always welcome to come out and run with us. We have I know you're not anywhere near as old as me, but we do have a retreads group that runs in the afternoons, and it's just a bunch of guys. We tolerate a lot of terrible driving. So if you ever have the inclination, you're more than welcome to come out with us and run a few laps. You maybe get Brody coaching you there a little bit.
Yeah.
You do.
He gives me a bad time all the time about not being able to do iRacing or getting. He keeps saying, "Well, Dad, since I can't race for a while, maybe we should get a street stock out there and you can race a street stock." And I'm like, "There is no way I'm going to get on the track in a street." So.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I know, you had said earlier there's concerns about him ever getting back in a sprint car again. So, if hopefully that our league can provide him an outlet for his energy and enthusiasm, and when he gets well enough to get back in the seat again. But we're all pulling for him. We got this fundraiser coming up in August for Brody, and the features will be they're going to be 22 laps in distance in honor of Brody, and I think behind me, you're looking at a green screen. I think behind
it's there.
Me, can he see it?
He can't see it. I'm the only one that can see it.
Yeah. So there's the logo. I think up here, Preston. Would it be
close enough? Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll see it when you see the podcast, Ed. But it's the Never Give Up logo that he has. So we carry that on our team's cars, and we're hoping that all the teams in the league will start running that logo on their wings.
Okay. So, yeah. Brody, we kind of came up with that logo when Brody, like I said, when Brody had the first tumor in his leg and was able to come back racing. And I'm not sure where we came up with that logo at, but we put it on every single car Brody races on, and you'll see that Never Give Up. So like when he raced a sprint car, it's always on like across the top of his wing. When he raced them modified, it was across the back, so other drivers that would come up on him would see that Never Give Up. And then like Brady's like, "Dad, what do you think? Someone comes up on me and they see that Never Give Up, And I said, "Yep, that's a good thing for them to see. Don't never give up, because you never know what's going to happen, either in life or in racing. You just never know." And so we always carried that logo on anything Brody races. We always make sure that Never Give Up is on all of his cars that he's raced at.
Yeah. So. And again, the discussion we had, you mentioned it briefly, but he's a focused kid. He's not, you hear all that, like you said, you hear all these stories about kids today, and he drives 20 miles to go to a school that supplies what he wants to learn about.
Yes.
And then drives to a job where he worked for 3 hours a night, and then we get in the shop and work on the car. That's it's amazing work ethic, and that's going to come in in handy and it'd be a bonus right now in these days and stuff.
Yes.
And hopefully before too long we can get Brody on himself, and we can maybe chat with Brody when things.
Okay. He would like that.
I just our hearts go out to him, and we want him back on the track, and I want him feeding me a right rear somewhere in one of the turns. That would be the highlight.
Sounds like Ed might be more likely the one to do that, but we won't go there.
But anyways, just want to thank you for coming on, and just wishing everybody well, and not only us, our whole league's thoughts and prayers are with you guys, and just keep up the good work, and say hi to Brody for us.
Okay, I will. And thank you for doing fundraiser, and we really, really appreciate all the support we've gotten. I mean, the support we've gotten is amazing. We've had people in North Carolina and Florida and all over the United States and Australia all sending us messages, and the local tracks doing some fundraisers for us, and even Shane Stewart, I don't know, donated a driver's suit for an auction, and the money, all 100% of the proceeds went to helping, because it's been tough with the doctor's appointments. And then one of the things that we've been having to deal with, and hopefully other people don't have to deal with, but when the ambulance crew, and I'm not, the ambulance crew did great. They did amazing work on the road, but when they build it, and they did their paperwork, they did it as an automobile accident. And so now when we're getting the medical bills, we have some insurance on Brody, but they're billing it as an automobile accident. And so everybody's getting confused, because our auto insurance saying, we're not paying that. That wasn't an automobile accident. But our insurance is saying, well, we're not going to pay it because it was an automobile accident. And so it's been tough there, because, like I said, the ambulance billed it as an automobile accident. The first hospital in Eugene billed it as an automobile accident. Then the ER up at Emmanuel, they billed it as an automobile accident. And they don't understand that it was an auto racing accident, not an automobile accident. So we're kind of going through some legal issues with that, because, like I said, y'all want to bill it as an automobile accident, and nobody wants to, our health insurance doesn't want to pay, the automobile insurance doesn't want to pay because it was an auto. So it's been kind of a back and forth thing with that. So it's been a little bit tough. But again, we appreciate everything everyone has really done for us and everything.
Yeah, and before we go, we do have to give a shout out to the Steve King Foundation.
Yes,
they do amazing work, and especially, I think their big key part is that tweener thing, which you're experiencing now, before the insurance stuff kicks in, and that interim help and that. But we've worked with Steve King Foundation a few times before, and I can't say enough about them. And thank God there's people like that out there. And
yes.
So a big shout out to them, because we'll be going through the Steve King Foundation for this fundraiser, and but all proceeds will be going to Brody. So just all the league members out there that are watching, these guys have been they've been amazing in the past. Just the support they show. So this is a great cause for a great kid, and we're excited about the event, and excited to see Brody get better along the way. So
okay,
thanks for coming on and being so open with us, and just appreciate you taking the time, buddy.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks for having me.